Today we're going to be talking about Agora, a 2009 film about a pivotal moment in human history. I'm a classicist and I'm joined by James Elias from Inductica. He's a physicist, and we're going to talk about a moment when the intellectual world of antiquity collapsed. The movie is set in Alexandria at the end of the Roman era. Agora depicts the final years of a civilization built on reason, argument, and the systematic pursuit of knowledge, and then the forces that brought it to an end. This isn't just a story about religion or politics. I think it's a movie about a lot of different elements that we want to get into. And we're going to give you some background in case you don't know the movie, that you don't need to know the movie. We're going to talk about it, but we do hope that you'll go watch the movie nevertheless. So we will have some spoilers as well. I think this is a movie we'll talk about where it's kind of how civilization forgets how to think at this point. So just a couple facts about the film. It's a movie's called Agora, 2009 by Alejandro Amenabar. Lead is Rachel Weisz. I think it's it with the V, I believe is how you pronounce that. And the setting is Alexandria in Egypt, which we'll talk about. And from basically 391 to, I'm going to say, around 415 AD, because that's when the real character, which I'll let you talk about more, that's when she is actually, things happen to her. And I'll let you, James, give us a little bit of background on the movie and the plot and all that.
We will be giving away the plot. First of all, thanks for having me on, Kirk.
Yeah.
So we will be giving away aspects of the plot. But if you know the story of Hypatia, this isn't there aren't going to be that many surprises. So, yeah. If you want to watch the movie after seeing this, I think your experience will be enhanced if you watch the movie after. So in this movie, it follows Hypatia, as Kirk said, and she was an actual historical figure at that time, an actual philosopher. And in the movie, she is on the right track of beginning to put together the way the solar system is actually ordered. And, of course, everyone at the time believes in the geocentric theory, the idea that the Earth is at the center. And she's in the process of starting to question that and actually see the evidence for the heliocentric theory, even though a lot of people at the time believe that it's absurd for very good reasons, for false, but very good reasons. And what I love, and we'll get into this as we go, is you see her actually put the pieces together. And she puts the pieces together exactly in a way that someone at the time would have had to put the pieces together. Now, we don't know if the actual historical Hypatia did this, but it's artistically excellent that they chose to make her do this. And it's worth noting that we don't know. A lot of Hypatia's works are lost. It's possible that she could have been putting this together by the time she was murdered. Now, while that amazing scientific journey is going on in her mind, there's political strife all around in the movie. Christianity has just been made legal, and Christianity is very much on the rise at the time. And you have these really terrorists called the Parabolani. By terrorist, I don't mean, they're in the Middle East and they're doing something bad. That's not what I mean by terrorist. I mean, they're literally using terror. I just mean it as a tactic, as a neutral statement, although I don't have a favorable opinion of them, but they're using terrorist tactics to promote Christianity in their culture. They're doing things to discredit the pagan gods. They're agitating to discredit, this other form of society. And the pagans are retaliating at times. They're attacking the Jews are retaliating. And so there's just this period of strife going on at the time where there's this enormous contrast in the movie between the political situation just deteriorating in the Agora, in the town square, while Rachel Weisz, Hypatia, is making these brilliant scientific achievements. And there's just so many levels of depth to this movie and integration between her scientific journey and the culture collapsing around her. It's definitely one of my favorite movies, though I am not one to really hold sad movies in high regard. I don't like focusing on sad movies, but it's worth noting that this is one of my favorite movies, and it's definitely my favorite sad movie.
First, I think I want to talk to you about the science and the physics behind what she's discussing. So one of the interesting things about the movie Agora is that and we'll talk about this a little bit later about some of the political, humanistic, cosmological views, but there's certain physics that she's, working with. There's certain materials she's talking about. And what's really interesting, like you're saying about the story, is that as she's becoming essentially more, you could think of it as enlightened, the world around her politically is becoming more darkened, right? And I thought that was a good part of the story, was that there's a progression of her starting with, I'll let you talk about some of the examples that she used if you want to. Some of the, she's talking about certain like pulling of the center. Like, what does she mean? She drops like a handkerchief, things of that nature. She's doing little experiments. She's having conversations with people. And then someone will question her. And then and there's a whole process by which she does this. And the movie does this periodically. And often it'll do this as it descends even worse into madness. And I'll let you reveal the big revelation at the end, which is, to me, is where all the dramatic focus actually is. It seems like there's a love triangle, but not really, because she's only in love with one thing. What's at issue is that we, as humanity, don't get this thing, which we would have gotten this piece of knowledge. I'll let you talk about more of the physics and the science behind it. I'd love to learn myself.
Yeah. So I'll break down her scientific journey. So at first she says, she's a Neoplatonist. So Hypatia was in fact a Neoplatonist. So she was a follower of Plato's philosophy. And as a result of that, she focuses in the beginning of the movie on how the circle is the perfect shape. And as a result, it's only natural that it should govern the heavens. You have this idea of ideas governing the world. And the circle being the perfect shape naturally should, be, have its proper dignified place in the glorious heavens, that kind of view. But she slowly, bit by bit, starts to entertain a more naturalistic view. She still has good elements of the naturalist view. One thing that I point out in one of my videos is there's a part where the men on the temple, there's Parabolani on the temple steps, and they talk about, hey, well, if the earth is round, why don't the people on the bottom just fall off? Why don't people on the sides slide off? Think about that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and
in a way,
it makes sense, right? I love that part because it shows the faces of the men watching this speaker, and the acting's great. They're wrestling with the issue. They're being depicted as wrestling with this issue. They're thinking about it. They were willing to entertain around Earth, but then, oh wait, the people at the bottom would fall off. Huh? Yeah. So, so now he's making a particular kind of error that you can see in one of my videos. I won't get into it now. She makes the the idea that there's just these laws of nature that just, there's a downness to the universe, and that'll make people slide off the edge. Whereas Hypatia, she says, there must be some mysterious wonder lurking beneath the earth that's pulling everything in. So already she's more on the right track than the average person, even though she's a Platonist.
Which is a reference to what? So we laymen's understand. Because she talks about this pulling. Obviously, we know what that is today.
So we know that's gravity, but the evidence she would have had is she knows the earth's round. And so she would have realized down really just means towards the center of the earth. That's what the word down means.
That makes sense.
And so there must be something pulling it towards the center. And this, personally, I think this is great because she has what I call an entity, a primacy of entities perspective on this, at least on this issue, where there aren't laws of nature, rather there are entities acting. And so she has that perspective implicitly. And that's one more thing that's in her toolbox of epistemological methods that gives her a superior perspective. So first, one of her students, Orestes, who's played by Oscar Isaac, says, man, the universe sure seems whimsical, because here's the deal. At the time, they thought the earth was at the center. Now, that view is quite inconsistent with what you see when you actually look at the planets in the night sky. over the course of many months, you see the planets move across the night sky, but they don't move in perfect circles. And of course they don't, because the planets aren't moving around the Earth. They're moving around the sun. The planets actually do this sort of loop-de-loop pattern. They'll start going backwards, and then they'll start going the other way. They do a sort of looping motion. And so you can't square that with the idea that they go around the Earth. But what the ancient Greeks did, what Ptolemy did, is he had a model where the planets are going on an epicycle, that is a circle on top of a circle. And so so Ptolemy was able to account for this loop-de-loop motion that we see in the night sky by saying that each of the planets that they could see, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, that these planets go on a circle which is attached to a circle. They're actually able to match the observations fairly well by doing that. And so when she's teaching them this model that everyone accepted at the time, Orestes says, man, it all seems so whimsical. And she agrees. She says, yeah, the heavens should be simple. And someone mentions Aristarchus's view. And Aristarchus was one of the first people to say that the Earth might not be at the center, that the Earth might be going around the sun. And the reason the planets do this loop-de-loop motion is the Earth is just one more planet that's going around the sun. And so its perspective is changing with respect to the other planets. But of course, he says this view, this character who introduces the heliocentric view, he says, of course, this is absurd, and we know it isn't true, because then we'd feel these incredible winds as the Earth moved. Or if you ever dropped something, the object would not fall directly beneath the point you dropped it, which is what we do see. The objects don't like curve in their path when you drop them. And so you can see at the time they had really good arguments against the heliocentric view. She says, I feel that what you say can be refuted, but I don't know how. So her intuitions are telling her, no, if we were moving, would it really do that? Are you sure? And so she felt like it could be refuted, but she knows she can't just use her feelings. So I love this, because this is how science actually progresses, where you feel something and your intuitions are making you aware of something. But of course, it's not rigorous to just say, I feel like it, therefore I'm going to believe this. So she doesn't, just immediately accept the heliocentric view at that point, even though she feels like it has some merit. Later, she tests this idea. Orestes, now grown up, no longer her student, but now her patron, Orestes takes her on board one of his ships. And as the ship is underway, she has her slave drop a bag from the top of the mast. And even though the ship is underway, the bag, a heavy bag, right? It's not going to be taken away by the wind. So the bag drops directly, the bag lands directly beneath the point it was dropped. It's not like the ship carries on without the bag.
Which does seem like it would. I think your intuition, right. My intuition would be, yeah, of course, if the ship is moving this way, you drop something, it's gonna, go like this. And one question I had for you actually is, maybe you're going to get to this, but yeah, I'm curious, did they do this experiment back then, or is this fictionalized? Was that an experiment that came later?
No, this is fictionalized. They didn't do that back then, but Galileo did this experiment.
That's what I thought. It was way later.
Yeah. So they brought this into the movie because this is something you legitimately, scientifically have to figure out in order to entertain the heliocentric.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
Because
like if it's a geocentric, if we're just stationary, which is what she starts at the beginning, right? She says, like the opening lines, I want to read the opening lines of the movie. How many fools do you think have asked themselves, why don't the stars fall from the sky? But you, who've had the teaching of the wise, you know that the stars move neither up nor down. They merely revolve from east to west, following the most perfect course ever conceived, the circle, like you've been talking about. And then she drops that handkerchief. It goes to the floor, and she steps down on the floor, and she's like, well, why are we going in this direction? And that's where you're talking about, it moves into the Ptolemaic system. And if it's geocentric, then yeah, like it makes sense that we're the center of the universe. Everything revolves around us. And now we just have to figure out what's going on with this, and the Ptolemaic, I think you mentioned it has two different circles. It has the one major circle of all the planets, or everything around us. The wanderers, I like that they called it wanderers, because it might look like in the sky, like, oh, it's just wandering around, right? Like, I don't know what it's,
right.
And then we just have to figure out.
Just means wanderer in Greek.
Yeah. And then, so it's like, but it has its own circle, and it's like, well, why is it going in a circle itself? And then it's, and anyway, so I just thought that was really interesting. Right. But then if the Earth is moving, which we are, we're also at a tilt and spinning, but like if we're moving, that seems weird, right? Yeah, it would seem weird to an ancient mind that's trying to grapple with these things. I just thought that was a really great moment in the movie, even though it probably didn't happen. At least we don't have a record of it, if it did.
If Hypatia did figure this out, which is very unlikely, if she did figure it out, then we don't have a record of it. But I mean, a side note regarding the historical inaccuracies of the movie. I think the movie is not historically accurate, although a lot of the major, all of the major political events really did happen. All the major political events in the story did happen. But they take a lot of liberties with this, and all of them are, even though they're not historically accurate, I would maintain they're very philosophically accurate. They carry great philosophical meaning, and that meaning is accurate. That meaning represents real facts about philosophy, is the way I'd put it. So, for example, the idea that Hypatia, figured all of this out herself, it probably didn't happen. But what has happened? People like her who had the wisdom and knowledge to break us out of our primitive beliefs, to progress mankind, they've been squelched and stunted by systems of religious faith and systems that, we're just supposed to believe a certain thing, and we don't tolerate those who think outside of that box. That is something that's happened over and over again in history, even though it may not have literally happened to Hypatia. There's some evidence that she wasn't necessarily killed specifically for being a witch, although that was used to drum up resentment against her. Even if it's completely a historic fabrication, this is artistically, it's something that really is important in the history of Western civilization. So anyway, just to finish off the scientific story. So she figures out, so she drops the bag, and she finds, if we were moving, it wouldn't cause incredible winds necessarily. It wouldn't, although actually they don't address the issue of wind. They actually don't address that issue, but it wouldn't cause objects to fall behind as the Earth, it wouldn't leave the object behind. Now, why is that? Well, I'll tell you really quick. Why does the bag not get left behind by the ship? I should just tell you why that is. The reason is once when the bag's being held up at the top of the mast, it's moving along with the ship. The bag's already moving. And the bag doesn't need a force to continuously push on it in order to continue moving. Velocity, movement doesn't require force. Rather, force causes a change in movement. So no force is required to keep the bag moving along with the ship. So once you drop it, it keeps moving at the same speed the ship is, and it just, plops down above that same position it was dropped, or rather below that same position it was dropped on the ship.
Out of curiosity, and this is just my ignorance, if it was a tall enough ship, like if it's 500 feet in the air moving, like would that change anything?
No.
Okay, I didn't think
now,
so.
It might change something because the wind. So the ship would be moving with respect to the air, and so basically there's a force of the air. The force of the air pushing towards the stern of the ship might push the bag, and over 500 feet, that might make a difference. But if you take the air away, that mast could be miles tall, and it wouldn't make a difference.
Wouldn't make a difference. Okay. Yeah. And I like the way she did it, or the way the movie depicted that, in the sense that she stood where she thought, like logic would say it would land. And then she was disproven. She's like, this is where it will land. And then she's happy about being disproven. Right. Which is an interesting perspective on how they do it, and something we can talk about, because there's
cool.
there's a strain of what seems like in the movie a kind of skepticism at the nature of it. But this is something I think they get wrong about science. Like she has this great line where it's like, that's fundamentally what's going on. She has this line at the end. She says to Synesius, he calls her a Christian, and we're going to talk about the Christian, pagan, and Roman Empire elements and the Jewish elements in the movie, and all these different pluralistic worlds colliding in this one area, Alexandria, Egypt, while this woman's trying to discover this heliocentric model. But she says to Synesius, a bishop who was one of her students,
You are as Christian as we are.
Synesius, you don't question what you believe. You cannot. I must.
I thought it was a good moment. I liked it, but I think it's an interesting perspective that the movie has, that skepticism, that the ability to question is the fundamental thing, rather than what I think it would be is more like reasoning from observations and, actually having a basis for knowledge, that you have to have a basis of knowledge is possible, and you can attain knowledge through a certain particular method. Now she's correct in a political sense that you need to have the ability to question. That is without a doubt. You need to have that ability, and that's true. I just thought it was an interesting framework that they had. They made it basically about about the ability to be skeptical, or the ability to question. Maybe skepticism is not the right word, but
I didn't take the emphasis that way. I thought it was more that, questioning your prior judgments is a key part of science. There's other places where she says, what if we dared to look at the world just as it is? Let us shed for a moment every preconceived idea.
But that is
looking at the world without preconceived ideas. So in my view, I took that as not an advocacy of skepticism, but just of objectivity. We have to look. It's not that we can't learn from looking at the world. There's none of that. We can. Yeah. So it's not really skepticism. She says you got to shed your preconceptions and just look at the world the way it is, and we have to dare to do it. Right? It's not easy to shed your preconceptions.
Okay, I agree.
She does achieve that. Yeah.
No, like I said, I thought they did a pretty good job with all that.
I think it was really good, and it goes deeper than that, because I think skepticism, or rather pragmatism, ends up being impugned. I mean, at least I tend to group pragmatism and skepticism together somewhat, and pragmatism at least ends up being impugned later in the movie, which I'm really excited to get to.
We'll talk about that. But why don't you finish your story?
Yeah, so to finish the story of the science, she knows now that it's possible that the Earth is moving. But but there's another problem with observations. There's another apparent clash between this hypothesis and observations, which is that the sun and planets are getting brighter and dimmer over the course of the year. Now, in the case of the sun, it's getting a little larger and a little smaller over the course of the year. If you look at the sun very carefully, then you'll find this. Well, you can't look directly at it, but if you project the sun onto a piece of paper, there's ways of projecting the sun onto paper, and then you can see you can see it getting ever so slightly larger and smaller over the course of the year. So how can we account for this? Because she wants to make the Earth now moving in a circle around the sun. And it turns out, and a lot of people today don't know this, but it turns out that's not true. The Earth doesn't move in a circle around the sun. It moves in an ellipse, basically an oval around the sun. And so this is the point at which she sheds the circle. She says, it breaks my heart to not have a circle. Or she says, it breaks my heart to not have a center. But she's a Neoplatonist, and the movie is true to this in that she holds the circle in high esteem. But then that's when she says, what if we dared to look at the world just as it is? And that's when she thinks of the possibility that it's actually an ellipse.
Well, I just want to say, I thought that depiction was good. That depiction was really interesting about throughout the movie. It was people mired in ideas. Well, Ptolemaic not perfect, Orestes says, but it's, it's pretty good, right?
It works.
And it's like, but it's not about it works. Thank you. But it's like, it's not about the ideas themselves. It's about getting to reality and better understanding of reality, which she does represent in the movie. But continue.
Yeah. And like, as I can tell you, as a physicist who has made progress towards understanding the edge of our knowledge in physics, specifically the ether. The ether is a concept that helps us understand light and quantum waves and things that we're wrestling with in the modern day. I've gone through this process of wrestling with my ignorance and being at the border of human knowledge. And I can tell you, the movie portrays this so accurately. The way it feels, the steps you go through, the frustration, the glory of getting new steps forward, and the excitement of that. It's friggin' amazing. It's such a good, those parts. I love those parts as profoundly joyful depictions of the scientific process. Unfortunately, that's where her journey ends, though. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
She's later killed, and artistically, I appreciated the last thing she sees before she's killed is an ellipse. She a thing that kind of looks like an ellipse.
I thought it was a circle.
Well, she's looking through a circular hole in the top of the temple, but she's looking at it slanted ways, so it kind of
because the light comes in. Yeah. So before we move on from the science, I'd like you to explain the last experiment she does, which I thought was great. And it was very interesting. I didn't it makes sense. I never thought about that experiment, but what was the experiment? What does it prove? And
you mean the geometric demo with the ellipse?
Yeah, with the sand with the two suns, right? So she basically puts two suns, which it's like a little confusing to someone at first, but there's a geometric mathematical reason she's doing this.
So it's worth noting, Hypatia could have figured this out. Again, she probably didn't, but she actually had all the pieces necessary. Everything she went through, she could have done, because the Greeks were aware of the ellipse as a geometric construction. The way you construct a circle is by putting down a marker and then moving a rope around that stationary anchored point. And of course, that draws out a bunch of points that are equidistant from a center, and that's a circle. Now, what if you want two centers, which is what is the way she puts it? I mean, it's not exactly two centers. If you put down two anchors and tie a rope to each of those two anchors, and then move a pencil in such a way, or not a pencil in this case, but like a rod drawing in the sand, if you move that rod in such a way that it's anchored to the rope, then the sum of the distance between each of those anchors, the foci, the sum of the distance between those anchors and each point along the edge actually forms an ellipse. And so she and what she found in the movie is that the sun is at one of the foci, and that ends up being true. Kepler is the one who's known for discovering this. And probably was the first person to discover it. But like I said, she could have been the one. It is possible that she could have figured this out herself.
Well, and there is a kind of what if element to the movie, right? Which I think is part of the structure of the movie, in the sense that the movie is about the burning of it's about Hypatia and her discovery, but in the background is the final burning, I think you could think of it as, of the Library of Alexandria. I just want to point this out because some people criticize, some Christians criticize, some Christians criticizing this movie said the Library of Alexandria burned in 48 BC with Julius Caesar, which is true. So the original burning of the main Library of Alexandria did burn under Caesar when he was there, but what they reserved from that was this smaller library. There's a moment in the story that acknowledges this, that says, and they talk about why, because Hypatia is trying to discover at that moment the heliocentric argument. And then this priest comes up. He's the one who actually reminds them. So he represents all this pre-created work written down, codified, studyable. And the more studyable and easy it is to access, and the better it is for you to do it, the more you can leapfrog to the next thing.
This is why we have to take great care of this place. Our library is all that remains of the wisdom of man.
And then what happens in the next scene, though?
They're being, besieged by a Christian mob, and, they appeal to the emperor, and the emperor comes back with an edict that says the people in the temple can go free, but the Christians are allowed to come into the temple and dispose of it as they please, and they do so. And
they do so. Yeah.
And they take all the scrolls, they burn them. And Hypatia is able to get away with, at least in the movie, Hypatia is able to get away with just a few of them.
I think some probably did survive. There was a great visual depiction. They show the Serapeum and all the scrolls and the categories and all these different things. Later, after the Christians have taken over, it's like goats. Right? They have like some goats and some hay. Like they've used it for that. And it's like, that's a real regression. Right? From this organized, modern library that's cataloging and thinking about things and having priests that are really scholars, having teachers, and now they have goats and sheep and, poop everywhere, right? Like that's what the Christians have contributed to the knowledge in that world. And I think it's a great visual depiction. And I have a feeling that at that and some of the depictions of the violence of Christians is one of the reasons why many Christians did react negatively to this movie when it was released. The movie itself, and again, it's not only depicting this fictionalized, I mean, that's probably the most made up part of this movie, is her coming to this conclusion that really didn't happen for 1,000, 2,000 years or whatever, right? Or it's 1,500 years with Kepler. Although she could have. It asked that like what if question and what was lost, because even if she didn't, we did lose a lot of knowledge in the final burn, in the first and second, and then even the final collapse of Rome, which happens shortly after this, as the final collapse where they just abandon that whole area and then it just schisms apart, barbarians at the gates of Rome and all that stuff. And then you have essentially soon the Dark Ages. This movie is, showcases her enlightenment, but it also showcases these various characters who represent factions within Alexandria, which is kind of the last bastion of culture and knowledge in the world. Classical Athens, 500 BC, that was the cultural epicenter was Athens itself. And then it kind of moves into Rome, and then I think it moves to Alexandria primarily quickly. And by cultural epicenter, I mean, that's where you send people to learn. That's where scholars spend their time to grapple with other minds, to write down their thoughts, and then they put them, hopefully adding them to the library. And there's a very important aspect of getting your knowledge into the library for all eternity is what you're trying to accomplish. And this is depicting the end of that. And you have these various characters that I think represent different factions or different experiences in Alexandria as it's coming to an end. You have Hypatia, Davus, the Slavus, and I'll let you talk a little bit about these characters. You have Orestes and Synesius, who are two students. Orestes is, I'll let you talk about that. But Synesius is a Christian. He's very Christian from the beginning to the end. He's very solidly Christian. In the second half of the movie, you get a very real and impactful figure, which is Cyril, a bishop of Alexandria, who takes over and basically controls that whole area after the Roman Empire. The Romans basically leave. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Davus, Orestes, and these characters and what you think they represent?
I hadn't really thought too much about what they represent.
Okay,
maybe
sure.
You can tell me. But
okay.
I mean, yeah, they clearly represent something. I just found them all. Well, I know what Orestes represents. I'll start with him.
Orestes is the clearest, right?
Yeah. So Orestes to me represents someone who downplays the importance of philosophy. He's the pragmatist. So in the beginning, he's someone who's part of high society, He's some sort of noble, basically. And so he's being educated in the library, and he's in Hypatia's class along with Cyresius. Yeah, I'm forgetting exactly how it's pronounced. He's sort of depicted as not taking it 100% seriously, but he still holds Hypatia in high regard. Orestes is a pagan, but he converts to Christianity basically for political reasons later. But it's worth noting that Orestes is not a coward. It's not that he's some sort of universal coward. And I think there's a very important part of the movie that I noticed on my third watching, that there's a point where a Christian mob is attacking the library, and they barricade the library, and basically they barricade the library and are hiding in it. And the pagans inside the library say, oh, well, any Christians that we've captured, we should send them into the dungeon. But then also they say any Christians who have been studying at the library should also be put in the dungeons. Basically, they're Christians. We can't trust them. They're on the same side as the people attacking the library. And Orestes says, if you lay a hand on any of my brothers, any of my classmates, including, of course, the Christians who are being threatened here, if you lay a hand on any of them, I'll run you through. So Orestes, he stands up against the authority figure who's saying we should put these Christians in the dungeon. Even our students, we should put them in the dungeon. So Orestes is not depicted as some kind of coward. So my interpretation is that he's a pragmatist. He has an ideology that does not fully understand the weight of philosophical issues. And so as a result, he becomes a Christian for these expedient reasons. And when he does that, they kind of represent that by, he loses interest in astronomy, and he says, hey, Hypatia, Ptolemy's system is, it's not perfect, but it works. And so even in science, he's depicted as, becoming a pragmatist. And incidentally, I have to mention, when it comes to quantum mechanics and relativity, whenever you point out the flaws in these theories, I reject both quantum mechanics and relativity. If you look at my channel, I can show all kinds of reasons how we can know that they're false. And a lot of times when you get into a debate and the other side, someone defending quantum mechanics or special relativity can't say anything more, they'll say this exact same thing. They'll say it isn't perfect, but it works. They'll make this pragmatic argument to preserve the prestige of this false theory. So he makes that same argument for the geocentric model. So he becomes a Christian, and later Cyril uses that against him. Cyril, who's the Christian bishop in that area, who's been drumming up a lot of the terrorism, basically, in order to help him gain more power over Alexandria. He's been drumming up the Parabolani and these goons, this Christian mob, basically, to enhance his own power. And Cyril, in the movie, Cyril confronts Orestes with a passage from the Bible that says women are to be subordinate to men. They are to remain silent. They aren't supposed to engage in worldly affairs. And he's reading this because he's saying, well, Orestes places the council of Hypatia in high regard. Orestes is obeying a woman, is basically what he said. And that's against the Bible. So, and later that leads to Orestes having to basically betray Hypatia, which he never quite does, but we'll talk about why he doesn't quite do that. But the point is that he actually betrayed Hypatia, years ago when he decided to become a Christian, and he didn't even realize it. He decided to assent to a set of ideas that gives Hypatia, as a female philosopher, no place in the world, no justification for the way she lives. And so he doesn't realize how important ideas are. And that's what undoes him. And at the very end, he's constantly trying to fight Cyril, and he tells Hypatia, well, we need to keep fighting Cyril. And Hypatia says, oh, Orestes, Cyril has already won.
Yeah, powerful moment.
Yeah, right? And he had won. Yeah, and it's so sad because he holds her in high esteem. He's in love with her at the beginning of the film, which is something I want to talk about more if we have time.
Yeah.
And, she rejects him, but he's still basically in love with her at the end. And he can't stand the idea of betraying her. But yet he basically has unknowingly by submitting to a worldview that rejects her way of life. So Orestes to me represents pragmatism.
One of the things I found really interesting about the movie was the attempt to connect these grand cosmological ideals to practical everyday life and the consequences. So like there's a moment in the very beginning when Orestes, and they're all in class, and Hypatia's teaching them about the center, and Orestes has this line where he's questioning the wanderers. Why do they wander? He says, if I were to have created, God should have basically asked me, I would have made it more symmetrical, more harmonious. And then Synesius, who's depicted as a friend, a colleague, a classmate throughout the movie, he says, who are you to question God? And Orestes says, what's wrong with you, Christians? Synesius stands up. It looks like they're going to fight. And then they even visually depict this really well, where Hypatia steps forward and they make visually a triangle. I don't know if you noticed that, but where it's like they have the two characters here and then she's at the center, and she says, what do we know about two equal sides of a triangle? That means that the third is also equal, right? And so she, in philosophy, there's a kind of idea of the right good triangle, that there's like three different sides and they're all equally morally important. But she's making this broader philosophical point about their practical methodologies of getting together, is that she says, aren't we all brothers? Aren't we all equal? And so even if you have your differences, we actually have a unity. And this, I think, is part of her Neoplatonism, which is about the one, that has kind of some remnants of the ancient Greek methodologies of the one and the many, although in a very Platonic, and then the next philosopher that she would have been a disciple of is Plotinus, in the second 200 AD. He's like the first major Neo-Platonism means new Platonism. And he has he's taking it to the next level, essentially, of what Plato had about this perfect form. She's all about perfect forms because that's her philosophical cosmological viewpoint. And my point is that the movie depicts pretty, I'm going to talk about a little criticisms at the end, but it depicts pretty well, I think, the idea that if your metaphysical or cosmological perspective and understanding of the world has real effects on your everyday morality, on your everyday relationship with other people, on the way you order your life, on the way you govern your city. And Alexandria comes from an emperor on down mode that held for a while the pluralistic society that they were living in, where you had Jews alongside pagans, alongside Christians, with slaves throughout. And there's a depiction of a couple times when they're like, there's nothing our army can do to this mob. This is the whole city. Like the army can't do anything, right? Yeah. I think that's a very accurate depiction of like, how do you govern and what kinds of belief systems are present. At the beginning, it's kind of, the very opening is this perfect triangle of ideological, so again, it's that perfect forms, it's that Pythagorean, there's something divine. So I think she's wrong in all this. I think she is this is part of the issue, is that she has these kinds of divine sentiments of mathematics and how they order the world. But then you have this pushing up against this whole other mode of approaching things, which is a Christian mode, which is not about argumentation, which is not about debate, not about reasoning from those points and evidence. It's about revelation in the Word of God. And this becomes more and more and more the dominant trend within the movie, to the point where at the end, like you're saying, the Orestes is put into a place, he's positioned, he's jockeyed by what I heard somebody mention Cyril is like the High Sparrow, if you've seen Game of Thrones.
Yeah,
he's like
sure.
he's a brilliant tactician in terms of positioning people to be put in situations where they are inevitably going to collapse. And this is something, I'm going to bring up Ayn Rand and some objectivists now. This is something that a lot of objectivists have mentioned about the problem with the kind of pluralism that compromises on essentials. So which is what Orestes does. Like he's trying to go along to get along. He's trying to, but the more consistent person, Cyril is, you got to respect him because he is unflinching, and I think he believes it, and everyone around him believes it. And so little by little, he and Christianity that he represents inches its way into the fold and, takes dominance. And I'll just mention the very beginning of the movie, part one, I'd say there's like two parts. There's part one and part two. And part one of the movie, which happens before the siege of, or the burning of the Serapeum, there's a scene between a priest of Serapeus and a priest I think his name is Ammonius. Ammonius, yeah, a priest of.
I remember his name because I hate that guy.
Yeah, he's very frustrating for sure. Yeah, he's not a good human. Although we could talk about the goodness aspect of it as well. But but they're having an argument about their two different gods, and I think in the Agora, Ammonius uses violence in the end, right? Like he uses mystical revelation. He says, I can do this thing. He walks across the fire. Nothing happens. So it's like, I performed a miracle. Can you do it? And then they literally throw him on the fire, and he obviously burns. And it's like, that's a revelation type of idea. But that type of, what I was trying to point out is just, there's a connection between the cosmological beliefs, or what we might call the metaphysical, your beliefs about your place in the universe and what makes up the universe and all those big, questions, that has real impact about your beliefs on ethics, your beliefs on politics, your everyday way of living and behaving. And I thought that was a good, interesting part of the movie, that they did a pretty good job of that.
They did, and as a result of that, they showed that you can't have both at once. You can't have a Christian worldview and science at the same time, at least not for long. It's always going to be unstable. One of those views is always going to win out over the other, and in this case, since the more consistent side will be the one that triumphs, you see the Christians winning and the pagans of the old world declining. And as a result, philosophy has no place in such a world, because in such a world, you're supposed to take things on faith. There's no place for Hypatia, because women are supposed to just be silent and subordinate. You can't avoid the fact that at core, these worldviews disagree, and you're not going to be able to have it both ways. One must triumph over the other in the long run.
Well, and I think it's an issue of epistemology, or theory of knowledge primarily, right? And as well as cosmology, which they go hand in hand. So again, Synesius and then Cyril is the next iteration. So Synesius he's also a student of Hypatia's, and he's interested in the Ptolemaic method, which has all these perfects, and he kind of agrees, I think, cosmologically. But as he goes on, the next iteration in part two, which happens, it says many years later, but I take it to be basically 15 or 20 years later, 415 AD, which is when she actually dies in real life. And Synesius comes to Cyril, and he comes to see that he's correct, that, he had revered her too much. He thought too much of her, and he makes Orestes bow down. I have to say, I think that scene between Orestes and Synesius at the end is very powerful, because it shows the symbolic bowing down of the empire, the Roman Empire, which is the most powerful source, the biggest source of power in the entire known world, bowing, and not just bowing, but sobbing pathetically. I thought that was a great touch. He's sobbing pathetically at the robes of Christ and, of the Christ-like bishop. And I think that's very accurate. That's why Rome fell. That's why, that's why the Dark Ages comes about, is that there's the last bastion of holding all this up is this man. He's been protecting her to the best of his abilities, and he just collapses by this priest and begs for forgiveness. And then, we find out that he basically abandons the city, and Cyril takes over. We don't see that, but we hear that in the story. So
yeah, and that did historically happen. Cyril ended up fully coming to power in that city.
Yeah.
And this is why I'll say that even though all the details historically are not the same, artistically it's just so well done in terms of the meaning of it. It's not necessarily that the historic Hypatia was betrayed by Orestes, but rather that the symbol of Orestes, the Roman Empire at large, betrayed this betrayed philosophy. It embraced this religion that has no place for philosophy, and that's why we got a dark age, a lack of any kind of philosophy or any kind of serious scientific inquiry into the world, and it's dark. There's no records from it because there was no progress at that time.
Well, and the Greek method of reason, observation, argument, all that, dies out at this moment. I've read that some people in science do kind of see symbolically Hypatia's murder as a kind of martyrdom to science, where it is like the end of scientific inquiry at that time. Like she is a pivotal moment, whether or not it was all real and how much it's what she represented. She is the final aspect of that. Like there's not really a scientist, so to speak, after her, as far as I know, not until the Renaissance. It's all theologian. I mean, maybe there is, I don't know. You could tell me, but
right. I mean, the point is that it doesn't, the specific details, like, was Hypatia the last one? That's not important to me. The fact is in this movie, it's an artistic depiction of what really did happen, which was a betrayal of philosophy and throwing it in the garbage in favor of Christianity.
So we've talked about Hypatia. She has an arc where she goes from trying to understand the world or the cosmos in a Ptolemaic way to a heliocentric, and then even solving the problem of the ellipsis and how the earth moves. We talked about Orestes. He kind of loves her. One way I would kind of sum him up is actually, I don't know that he betrayed philosophy so much as he's always thought of it as a game. And when he didn't win Hypatia, it kind of, like he still always loved her, and some part of her had a love for her, of course, and he defends this old way of thinking. But then as you put it, and I agree with it, his pragmatism takes over, where he's always kind of pragmatic. Like he just uses music to try to do this. He tries to, use whatever arguments he can. And then at the end, that collapses into real solid knowledge, or not knowledge, the person who is certain about their faith, and he collapses into faith essentially. And I thought that was the sobbing of faith. And that's the last scene of him. Well, the last scene of him, I think, is when he's telling Hypatia that he can't protect her, and she tells him that Cyril has already won. And then, obviously she's correct. So then we have Synesius, who's this Christian throughout. I thought, he did love Hypatia in his way. He respected her as a woman, as a kind of virginal person. I think he actually respected that about her. Like when he's leaving the siege, so at night he escapes the siege. He comes up above her and like says, my dear, mother. He does a prayer for her. May you be protected. And then he jumps over the wall of the Serapeum and joins his Christian brothers. Now, the last person we haven't talked about, the last major person, is, of course, Davus the Slavus. And Davus, I think, is the most interesting of all of them, besides Hypatia. And that is because, in my view, he's presented as having more of a conflict. Like, I don't think Hypatia has a conflict, really, other than external conflicts. Like her conflict is an intellectual conflict of trying to figure out what's going on. And she's struggling with that while people are around her collapsing. And, but she represents, or she goes through that process, but Davus seems to, love her. And then he, And so he almost almost adopts her cosmological worldview, but then he's kind of pulled into the cosmological worldview of the Christians, and he adopts that worldview. And yeah, so I don't know if you had more to say about that. I can talk a little bit about it as well, but I just thought, I know you liked that character as fascinating, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on him. So he's her slave, just so everybody knows. He is Hypatia's slave.
Yeah. Yeah. He's present during her lectures, and he falls in love with Hypatia, and in my view, for all the right reasons. He admires her intellect, and he starts thinking about cosmology. And one of the things he does is he builds a wooden model of Ptolemy's system, which also functions really well, by the way, to just show the audience what Ptolemy's system looks like.
Yeah, it's
with
great.
Circles on top of circles.
Yeah. Circles on top of circles. So, why so many circles?
Yeah. Because I think, so, and it immediately visualizes that just for the audience. And then at the same time represents, Davus's, his interest in astronomy. The thing is he's still treated as a slave. He still has this particular, place in society. And he starts talking to Ammonius, the Parabolani, the agitator, the main agitator in the film. And Ammonius shows him the way. He shows him the Christian way. He tells Davus to give to charity, and he guides Davus in giving bread to homeless people. And he says, look at their faces, as though to say, like, well, like, this is all the purpose you ever need. And he says, now you look like a true soldier of Christ. And Davus's face, he actually, for the first time, like, feels pride in himself. And so what I take from this is, like, Davus is in this position, of subjugation, and he finally has this way to feel good about himself, basically. And I think this was very, I really liked this part. Because I think Christianity it gives you this moral credit for free. Like, all you have to do is subjugate yourself to the will of God. All you have to do is give to charity. You don't have to figure out anything. All you have to do is self-sacrifice, and all you have to do is bow before, this savior, and you get this immediate moral credit. Now it costs you everything. It costs you your independence. It costs you, if you submit to it completely, it costs you your chance at your own life. But in exchange, you get automatic pseudo self-esteem. You get this automatic moral credit that requires no thinking. It requires no real effort. You just have to submit. You just have to self-sacrifice. And I thought that it depicted that fact about Christianity very artistically, very true to facts there. I really liked that part. Davus starts participating in these Christian mobs. He personally tears down a statue of a philosopher when the library is raided by the Christians.
Oh, was that a philosopher?
I
didn't think of that.
Yeah, he specifically tears down a statue of a philosopher.
Okay. Well, I know it was like what Ammonius
in it.
I thought it was a good cinematic moment, because you, as the audience, if you're watching it nakedly, you don't know if he's actually going to go kill Ammonius or the statue, and they even film it in that way. Like, they set it up where, and so I think it's the turning point in his soul is the idea. And like, they have him walking out with her and Hypatia. He has all the scrolls. He throws them on that cart, and then he sees a spear or some kind of scythe weapon, and he takes it. And as he's leaving, Orestes says, if he wants to die for our gods, let him. And I think that's a really interesting. So again, they're framing it for the audience as like, that's what he's going to go do. And then as all the people pour into the city, there's all screaming hallelujah. They're all, happy, and they're not harming him. And then Ammonius says, Davus the Slavus, come up here and help me move this. And then Davus starts, the look on his face is very ambiguous. And you're like, is he going to kill this dude and just, sacrifice himself? And then he's actually swinging. And if you look at the shot, we don't know what he's hitting for the first hit or two. Like you can't, if you look at it again, he swings and it's like Ammonius is not on the shot. So it's just the sculpture itself. And then you see that he's swinging. And then the next shot is brilliant because it's Ammonius having almost this look of, oh, maybe he might have actually come to kill me. Right? Like he has a look of like, it's not like just pure, oh, hey, yeah, he's with us. It's like this, it's a very interesting, look, I have to say one of the strongest points of this story, and hopefully we have a little bit of time. I want to say a few criticisms. I hate to burst any bubbles, but I think one of the strongest elements of the story was the acting. The acting carried a lot. If you paid close attention to, and the visuals were really good. They did a great job with the visuals. Again, throughout the movie, you have two different depictions of theories of knowledge visually. You have the kind of student debate, with a guide, with Hypatia in her classes. And then you have preachers and Cyril. Ammonius even takes Davus to go see in a church where there's a priest kind of preaching the word of God. And it's just everyone sitting quietly and listening to this authority kind of tell you the revealed word of God. And it's two different modes of gaining knowledge that are depicted, which I thought was nice, a great depiction of that. And then of course, Cyril uses that. And then of course, Cyril demands everyone kneel to do this, which actually isn't a Greek mode of even within their pagan rituals. Like, especially the farther back you go, the Greeks, when they were Greek religion, especially if you go to like the classical Athens, the Roman era, when they were praying, they were essentially standing tall because their belief was the gods would want to see you as you are, as your total, not to see you like kowtowing and bowing to their greatness. Even if you revered their greatness, it was more like you admired them and you wanted to show them your total self. Like, this is who I am, right? This is me. I want you to see me. Bowing and kowtowing is the opposite. It's the abnegation of the self, right? It is saying, I'm nothing, you are everything. And I thought they did very good visual depictions of those kinds of ideas, and how they're represented, in the film visually. It was really good.
He had to choose between his Christianity that had given him this pseudo self-esteem and his true love for Hypatia and philosophy. And he clearly chooses. And at a certain point, he's asked, hey, in that one conversation where they're debating where the Christians are debating whether the earth is round or not, they ask him, hey, Davus, like you know about this stuff. Is the earth round? And he said, only God knows such things. So
yeah.
He
really
goes
to the other way. Yeah. So I think he definitely loves her for sure. And I think he loves her kind of throughout, but I think she represents this kind of paganistic old model, and that he learned because he loves her. Now, what's also depicted in the movie is her view of him, which is as a slave and a puppy, a dog, basically. Like, there's a scene where she has him kneel. She helps him. She's kind to him, but she kind of scruffs his head and walks away. When he bathes her, and it is the most asexual thing. Which, if you think about it from his for her, right? It's for her. It's completely asexual. Right. He's an ornament of the universe she inhabits. He's not a sexual being at all. And
he's an appliance.
He's an appliance. Yeah. And again, for him, that has to be very frustrating to bathe the woman you love, and her not even be looking. She's like thinking about the stars or something like that. It has nothing to do with you. And now that's just the way she is. She's even that way with Orestes. Like, there's a great scene later in the movie, I think in the second half, when she's about to come up with the elliptical theory, and Orestes comes, and I think he tries one final seduction, right? And so he comes down, he sits, she's laying down, he reminds her of this moment. Nobody would ever see you as a mother and wife or whatever. I don't think anyone's ever forgotten that, the handkerchief or whatever, when she basically gives him a gift of her period blood, basically, as like a gift of like, that's not beautiful. Don't put the harmony you think is in the universe in me. I'm not that. And anyway, so in the end,
The classic, it's not you, it's me.
yeah, exactly.
rejection.
Yeah, like, I'm not beautiful. You're putting too much into me.
Dressed up with a lot of interesting intellectual content, but still it's
again,
not you, it's me rejection line. Only in her case it made sense because she didn't want to, like, I mean, if she that I think that was the only socially acceptable way for her to, reject him and maintain her own freedom.
Yeah.
So
that's what she wanted, was to, like, she was in love with the cosmos and with math and science. And that was clearly her through line of love, in that there's just no, and I thought that was great. She always loved that. Other people loved her, and she tried to, navigate that as much as she could. But yeah, when he's seducing her, he's holding her hand. And then I think this is when she says, I would give anything to unravel the heavens. I think that's the line. And then I would die a happy woman. Her hand kind of leaves his hand. Again, it's a great visual. I like visuals. It's cinema. So he's holding her, and then her hand goes up, and in his hand drops. And look on his face is like, this is not ever going to happen. I don't know what I'm even trying for. Mm-hmm. And she walks away, and goes, we have to start over. We have to, question all our premises and basically start from the beginning. And there is a look of admiration on his face, I think. I think Oscar still is like, that's her. That's why we love her. But I thought that was a great, sequence of showing the kind of arc of him and his love for her, and things like that.
That's really great. You've noticed a lot of things that I didn't. I loved your description of that scene with Davus. I think it says something that I never entertained, the idea that Davus might not betray philosophy. So I did not notice the ambiguity in that scene where you're not sure if he's going to kill Ammonius or topple the statue of the philosopher.
Yeah, go watch that again.
Notice a lot of these. Yeah.
Watch that whole sequence of him. So the sequence is she calls him an idiot, and it's Rachel Weisz's choice there of real disdain for him.
Yeah.
It's like, you can feel it. It's great acting. She's like, why aren't slaves ever here when you idiot? And she just it's like, whoa. And it's like, she just expects him to just keep doing what she asks him to do. And this is a flaw of hers and her worldview, by the way. I think she has a worldview of these slaves are just pieces of, and that's a flaw. And that is one reason why I think Christianity wins out a little bit, is that one of the things Christianity does as a political movement is because there's a lot of these quote unquote mystery cults starting around the time of Jesus and onward that are, revealed God, and they're all very similar. One of the reasons Christians succeeded is they did a couple things. They did one thing. It's like, a lot of these mystery cults said they allowed people to join a variety of mystery cults, and it was okay. So what happened was, politically, people would say, well, I'm going to subscribe to all of them just in case, right? It's just a political thing to do. And then, but the other thing the thing that Christian says, like, no, you have to be with us or you're against us. Again, it was a kind of firmness in that. You either believe in us or you don't believe in us. And if you believe in us, you're saved. That's all you have to do. But you can only do one. You can't have all of them. So they made that. Another thing they did is, I think they allowed for women to be allowed into their sect, as others didn't. They took on the kind of ancient bias against women. Christianity did allow women to be equal members of equal Christian. Although equal in the sense of Christian cosmology, obviously, as you mentioned earlier, they still have to be silent.
They allowed them into the cult. They still had this subordinate role, but they were allowed into the cult.
Into the cult. With. Yeah. And that is, and then I think there is this idea of the meek shall inherit the earth, that is presented well in the story. And again, if you think about that time, that would be a little bit of a seductive premise for a slave, right? And so when you have a society of slaves, these are educated. Some of these slaves are educated, right? These are not dumb slaves all the time. They're not all ignorant people. These are Alexandrian scholarly slaves. They probably would have been a little more educated, just hanging out with these people, right? You even see at the end, she looks to her slave when she realizes not Davus, another slave, when she realizes that she might have solved this problem, And she said, did I solve it or am I wrong? So the fact that she would even ask a slave that, I think is really, really compelling. So
So
I think
he
those
has
are
the facility to actually help her with her work. You know, it's not like he's lost. He's able to follow what she's doing.
I think those are the major elements of the story and the era. I didn't know if you had other things you wanted to point out about the movie or the historical era that you thought was interesting.
I'm not sure if this was the intention of the filmmakers, but it made sense to me that Hypatia had no romantic response to any of the men who approached her. And that made sense to me because they weren't her equals. And I think a woman can only romantically respond to someone who she holds in high regard, and they have to at least be an equal. If not, she has to see, you know, the man as her superior. That, you know, that doesn't mean all men are superior to women. Of course, quite the contrary. In this movie, she's superior to all the men around her, and as a result, she has no romantic response to any of them. That's what I took from it. Though I don't know if that was really their intention. I think their intention was more that she was in love with philosophy and of course, if she did take, well, it's worth noting she probably could have gotten away with being with having a secret affair with Orestes, but she's not and she could have done that without sacrificing her philosophy, I think, but she has no interest, and it made perfect sense to me that she didn't. My wife had a funny misconception about a certain part of the movie. There's a part where she's lying on a couch and like looking at the stars, and she says, what has my life even been for at this point? And because she's frustrated that she's not making progress. That's the scene
I was talking about earlier with Orestes' final seduction.
Yeah. And my wife at that point got a little confused. She thought that she was now living with him and that they were lovers. And she says, oh man, your life is so hard, honey. You're in a beautiful mansion. You have this beautiful man, you know. Oh, poor you. But that's not, so I thought that was fun. But then her misconception, my wife's misconception of what was going on was immediately corrected when, you know, she rejects his final advance. So that was just sort of a funny incident. And so, but it made sense that she had that misconception because he was supporting her research and, you know, she was spending a lot of time with him. And they were connected. They were really good friends in that way, but she couldn't be attracted to him. And it makes perfect sense to me from a masculine, feminine point of view.
Yeah. Again, I don't think that is what the directors and writers were focused on. It does feel like there's a kind of love tryst or triangle possibly happening. But again, this is, so one thing about this is not a Hollywood movie. This is a Spanish Malton production. They financed and produced this, and there's, you know, which I think is why it's more intellectual. I think Hollywood would get rid of all the ideas and make it just about the love story, which is a powerful, good story, but it also would sell more, I think, than this did. This flopped a lot. Like they lost a lot of money on this. And
God, that's so sad. They lost money.
Oh yeah. Man, well, it was financed mostly financed by Spanish government entities, things like that. But but that's just, you know, that's how other organizations tend to finance. Like we finance it a little bit more privately in America, but we have a whole system of Hollywood. And anyway, this is a long story about financing. But the point is that I don't think that was their primary. I think they did do a good job of making it. She was dedicated to one thing. Other people around her changed and shifted, and the world shifted, and they loved her for different reasons. But she wanted to get out of it. I don't see the elements of like one wasn't an equal. Although, you know, because for instance, I think intellectually, there's a chance that Davus might have been able to be an intellectual equal, right? Like the fact that he did that just as a student, like she even praises him. Let's all clap for Davus. You know, but I just don't think that, obviously he's a slave. It's not going to happen. I just don't think that's the main point of it. So,
well, maybe, you know, all these people may have had intellectual gifts, which were on the same level, but, you know, Hypatia chose an uncompromised pursuit of the truth. Davus never overcame his inner conflicts, and Orestes gave himself conflicts, right from the start, that he never resolved. So it's their choices that put her above them, in my judgment.
Sure,
and
sure.
which is
She was
why it
above
makes sense
them.
to me. Oh, of course she wouldn't be attracted to these men.
Sure. She was above them intellectually. I mean, she was the teacher.
Yeah.
Right? And they always looked
Yeah.
at her that way. And that's very true. And so, you could look at it that way. I don't think it's like there's anything wrong with it if you do. So I guess I'd like to finish with a couple criticisms of the movie.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a great movie, even though I really enjoyed it.
Oh, okay.
I enjoyed it. I think it's worth watching. This movie has really solidified my view that you cannot do a historical drama without a miniseries. Because what I was realizing as I was watching it is you have to have an inordinate amount of knowledge coming into it to really get what's going on. And that's part of the problem. So because there's all these factions and you're like, why the heck are they doing this and that? And okay, they hate each other, but what's going on with the background? This is supposed to represent. So I realized I was bringing a lot of my knowledge about the era, about the ideas to bear, and it wasn't really being conveyed in the movie itself. And to me, one of the greatest historical dramas ever is Rome, the HBO Rome. Have you ever seen that? So
I couldn't get through that much of it because I didn't like any of the characters. But I've heard that they improve, like they morally grow.
No, they're not going to be the morality you want. This is, again, so this is a historical drama. Yeah. But anyway,
right.
we can talk about Rome some other time.
I saw like 5 episodes and I was just like, oh, this is just Breaking Bad in Rome is what I thought. And so I stopped.
Well, we could talk about
like bad people doing bad things in Rome. So I'm just like,
Sure.
I really like Spartacus. I don't know how.
Well, there's a lot more boobies in that one.
Actually, well, yeah, man. That was definitely a big draw. But I mean, I thought
that's
Spartacus
more
was
fantasy,
serious drama with a lot of boobies in it. But I mean, the boobies were great, and then the drama I thought was great in Spartacus. Anyway, tell me more about Rome. I'm sorry.
So I'm not going to talk about Rome that much. I'm just saying, for me, that is the model for a great historical drama, because it depicts in much more detail and it plays out over time. And all of the different intricacies of the factions involved in allowing Julius Caesar to come to power, which is season 1, and then the rise of Augustus in season 2 and the beginning of the empire. And you see all the little factions. You see the two soldier characters representing 2 different worldviews and their play throughout the story, and all the big figures that they're. So it's a brilliant depiction over time. Agora really needs 8 episodes to flesh out what's going on, what's happening with Hypatia, what does she believe? I mean, so much. I think you need to watch our episode today before you watch Agora. and I think that is a problem for a movie. A movie's more like a short story. It needs, and like all art, it needs to stand on its own. So, to me, that was a big part of it. I thought Davus was pretty inexplicable if you don't understand some of the philosophical things that we were. So in retrospect, when I was watching it, I think I'm pretty good as a viewer of art to shut off my rational brain and be a child. And just who is this? Because I think that's what you need to do. You suspend disbelief to the highest degree and just kind of let the story take over your soul and let it just be there watching. Don't kind of hypothesize about things. Don't have preconceived ideas about it and what you think is supposed to happen or who's morally good or not and why. Let the artist tell you what he's trying to tell you. And then you can criticize and think and contemplate. I think that's an important part of it. So in the end, I contemplated and I was like, okay, I think I understand what's happening with Davus as this slave and he's torn between these 2 worlds. And that I think that is all there. But again, because it's not even 2 hours. It's what Hollywood has done with epics, with historical drama epics, is they've tended to make it about the spectacle often. And I think that's the right way to do it in a movie, honestly. Because again, you just need to have time for the characters to discourse on these ideas over time and to see them progress in more detail. It's required. I mean, anyway, so that's my major criticism, is that a lot of it felt a little unmotivated if you don't know a lot of the background and what's going on. You're like, that these people are trying to play certain things. Having said that, I have a lot of praise for it. I thought the cinematography and the visuals, as I've pointed out, were great. There's so many great visuals. One criticism that Christians have said about this movie, I think is completely, all their criticisms are dumb, honestly. But one of them was that the depictions of Christians in the movie is ridiculous, right? Like they're violent, and Christians aren't violent. It's like, yes, they are. Christians could be violent. But what I thought the movie still did a fair job of is it's actually the pagans who start the violence, right? Like Christians are very dishonest about this. Like they're the ones who come in. The first violent scene is them butchering Christians in the street, right? But then later you get this kind of, I think Bishop Barron has this popular video from like 9-10 years ago or 12 when the movie came out, of like the Christians looked like cockroaches in the city, which I think is partially true in terms of the visual depiction. But again, I think they were all equally wrong according to the movie. The movie was showing two modes of knowledge, which is the reason-based, the last vestiges of the reason-based argument debate model, and the model of preaching and the things of that, and the word of God revealed.
I think you're right about the context of knowledge of most viewers. I came into this probably with the perfect context of knowledge required to understand everything they were trying to do here. My wife also found Davus to be inexplicable.
Yeah.
And then I literally had to pause the movie and explain it to her in turn. And I mean, and my wife's an objectivist. She's also an artist, so she has probably probably your ability to just watch the movie without preconceptions. I didn't even try. I don't try to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just, and so I paused it and I just explained, he doesn't have self-esteem, then Christianity gives him that self-esteem. But then he still feels bad about betraying this woman he legitimately loves. And I explained it and she was just like, oh, okay. And then it made sense to her, but I had to explain it. And, so I had to bring that whole philosophical, background in order to understand what was going on with Davus. And then of course, I know the history of science really well. Although, tell me, Kirk, did they explain that? I think they explained the science, her scientific journey. I think they made that very understandable. Do you agree with that? To me, it seemed like someone new to all of this would get what they're talking about the whole time.
Oh, like a non-scientist? Yeah, I thought they depicted that. Yeah. How real the whole mechanism of thought, in terms of coming up with those conclusions would be. I don't know. I think movies are limited in that you need a novel because you need to see it thought through in the mind of the person in introspection. And because that's really the work of a scientist, is the introspection, which we get none of that in a movie, right? You only get some of their outward, but I thought like for what it was, they did a great job of visually depicting a lot of what they could, which I thought was a major strength of the movie. And again, I think the second major strength was the acting. I thought the acting was phenomenal. They carried a lot of the weight of the meaning of what they were trying to convey. Again, watch that scene of Davus the Slavist. Watch him go through that process. It's like 3-4 minutes. And the look on his face as it transforms, the look on Ammonius's face after after Davus takes down the statue, I think is very great acting. Like they're really depicting meaning well in that. And Rachel does a great job. And I could totally see every man in the city falling in love with that woman. I mean, just the look on her face, like she is like, oh my God, she's gorgeous. She conveys intelligence and a kind of sprightly kind of intelligence, and she does this in The Mummy. She's the librarian in the Mummy series, right? And she does a great job of kind of conveying that kind of feminine intellectual curiosity which has a kind of, she's certain about things. So she's fascinated by these riddles and how to solve them. But she also has, lack of a better word, a kind of humility toward reality and trying to figure it out, which I do think humility is probably the right word in the way she conveys it.
I appreciate you delving into this movie with me. It's one of my favorites.
I enjoyed this.
I hope the audience will have their experience enriched of it as well. I definitely recommend. You can buy it on Amazon. You can also YouTube. Yeah,
I think it's free on YouTube actually. I think right now if you go,
oh really?
I think YouTube is starting to do more movies. Yeah, Agora movie free if you're
in Canada.
If you're a subscriber, I should say. So you have to be a Prime member of YouTube. If you have like the premium service of YouTube, you do get
YouTube
it for free.
TV.
Yeah, YouTube TV.
Oh, okay.
Just type in Agora and it's free. So if you pay for it. All right, everybody. Well, thank you so much for joining in. Please leave us your comments. Go over and subscribe to Inductica. Check out what James has talked about with all of his physics and science, and he does great videos over there. And anything else that's new for you before we sign off?
I recently had a video where I use clips from Agora, so you can watch that. It's called the video is called "A Primitive Superstition That's Holding Physics Back," and I use clips from this movie to demonstrate that superstition. So, I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about one of my favorite movies. So glad we finally did this.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.